Hello and welcome to the Service Above Self, a television show intended to highlight the good work being done in the name of community service. My name's Clark Mason. As you travel the highways and byways of the land and you enter a new town, more often than not, you'll find a sign that welcomes you to town and perhaps some signs of community service organizations such as Rotary International. You find it often that there'll be a meeting time listed and a restaurant at which they meet more often than not. So what is Rotary and what are these people up to? To help us answer these questions, we have past District Governor Jim Duza and incoming District Governor Prasad Menon to help us answer these questions. So gentlemen, what's the story? You guys a bunch of closet restaurant critics or what's going on? What is Rotary and what are you doing? Prasad?
Well, Rotary is an organization of men and women dedicated to make this world a better place to live for everyone, working through their communities, their profession, and through international organizations to bring in the kind of things the people who doesn't have so that they can be just as good as anyone else. So this whole world will be a better place for everyone.
That's great. So has Rotary been around for a long time, Jim?
It has. It was started in 1905 by a gentleman named Paul Harris, a gentleman who grew up in Vermont and took a job in Chicago as an attorney. He missed the camaraderie of that small New England get-togethers that he had in Vermont. So he, along with 3 other associates, started meeting weekly and became Rotary International. From there, a year later in 1906, Rotary sponsored its first community project, building community toilets outside Chicago City Hall. From there, lots of other groups and agencies grew from Rotary. In 1945, the United Nations was helped chartered by 49 Rotarians, and the first 3 Secretary Generals of the United Nations were Rotarians. The Easter Seals and Junior Achievement were all started by funding and through mentoring of Rotary International.
That's some pretty impressive pedigree of how it all got started. You gentlemen will talk about the fact that do things at the district level, but first and foremost, you're guys who have membership in an individual community club. What type of things do you do having to do with your own communities? Prasad?
Well, the club is the pillar of the Rotary. Everything is done through the clubs. So it's very important that the members of the club meet every week for fellowship and also to formulate plans for the community projects they want to do to improve their community first, because that's where they live. Then they also formulate plans for various projects that involves international communities, and the meetings are the basics for development of all these things on a weekly basis.
Now, what I knew about Rotary as a kid when I was in high school, the Rotary Club of Suffield happened to meet at the restaurant where I worked, and pretty much the only thing that I knew about them was, that they only had one of every kind of vocation that there was that was in it. There wasn't duplicates, and the fact that they gave out a scholarship when it came to graduation time at the high school. But other than that, I had no idea what they did. What are some types of things that your Rotary Club does, Jim?
Well, my Rotary Club, and I'll speak on behalf of the 63 clubs that comprise our district. Rotary International is broken up into districts, and there's 530 districts in the world. Our district runs from Waterbury north, from the New York border to the Rhode Island border, and we have Western Mass from Worcester to the New York border as well. And then the 63 clubs do some amazing things. They focus on literacy. They focus on feeding the hungry. I can tell you probably more than half the clubs in our district sponsor or help build soup kitchens in their communities. They do projects. Prasad's being a little modest, his club helped sponsor the first boundless playground in New England. Prasad, if you want to enhance about Jonathan's dream?
Yeah, the first one, the biggest issue for kids on wheelchair, they like to play in a playground like all the other kids, but they cannot access any of those playthings there. So in 1994, we came up with the idea with a child who was dying at that time. The mother wanted something in the name of that child. So they came to the Rotary and say, what can we do to have a memorial kind of thing for that child? And I was at that time the district chair for community services. And I talked to a few Rotary clubs, and they all seemed to be very anxious about doing something. And my responsibility was to bring all the clubs together in the district. So I thought that may be a good idea, because who would say that we don't want something for a child who is on a wheelchair to play with? So we managed to get the whole district in the Connecticut side. This was on the Connecticut side. Our district also includes the Massachusetts side. And we started the project to build a playground for children on who can access everything there up to 95%. Nothing is 100%. 95% wheelchair accessible playground. And the Jewish Community Center donated an acre land to build it, because this will take about an acre. And several other organizations started partnering with us. And sometime in October, I don't remember the date, we had about 400 people, mostly Rotarians and Rotary friends, building that playground in Bloomfield, West Hartford border, in the Jewish Community Center, the land donated by them, a playground that can be accessible by wheelchair children, and it is still there.
That's pretty incredible, because I would certainly think, when I think about a playground when I was a kid, a swing set,
Yeah.
A seesaw, those types of things, slides are
Yes.
not going to be accessible by someone in a wheelchair,
Yeah.
and the ability to make something that would make it
Right.
easier for them to participate is really a big thing, so that they can participate with other children and not have to just stay on the sideline. So that's a pretty wonderful thing being done. It's pretty interesting that you talk about the fact that you're able to partner with other organizations outside of Rotary. So, Rotary is just not an island that takes care of the projects that they're doing by themselves.
That's
They
correct.
aid other organizations as well. Is there other types of projects that have been done where you've had that type of partnership?
Well, the largest project the Rotary, our district, or maybe any district have ever done in the whole world, may be a host family program designed by then Governor Weicker, when we had the World Special Olympics in Connecticut. I just happened to be the community chair that year too, and Governor Weicker approached service organizations to help him to promote Connecticut to the rest of the world as part of the World Special Olympics. It's about 146 countries going to be represented in Connecticut at that time. So one of the program was the host family program. That means all these athletes and their coaches will come, spend 4 days before the Olympics with families in Connecticut. And the idea was to get each community to adopt a country and become their sponsor. And we had about 166 or 67 communities in Connecticut, if I remember correct. And we are 146 countries. And it was an 18-month project to get host families to adopt these young athletes, because they are certain ways handicapped, but we had enough and more host families. We had to turn away some of the families at the end, because we are more than we needed.
That's right.
And it so happened these families, communities basically adopted those athletes from those countries, and they all went to Yale Bowl, where the Olympics was held, and they were the cheerleaders for all these teams. And that was one of the biggest projects we ever done, most successful project we have done. And Rotary was responsible for that host family program.
So that part of the greater thing that really
Right,
took to put on
right.
all the Olympics.
The entire state was involved in it.
That's great. No, it's a pretty amazing thing that gets done. Another aspect of Rotary that I think that people don't really realize is that with the fellowship and the organization of the clubs is that it's actually designed in a way to develop new leaders as well. People who are asked to join can, in many cases, very quickly take part in the leadership of the clubs, and maybe you could explain how that works a little bit.
Well, matter of fact, this past weekend, we just had President-elect's training in Nashua, New Hampshire, where 550 presidents from all of New England gather in Nashua for 2 days of intense training, from leadership styles to public speaking to learning about the history and activities of Rotary International.
Yeah, it's kind of a very important thing. Many of the people who end up joining Rotary are either business leaders or they may be entrepreneurs. And oddly enough, they may not have the skills to work well within an organization like that. And so the leadership that you have can very quickly, and of course with Rotary, it changes every year, right?
That's what makes Rotary very unique, is that we change our entire slate of officers every July 1st in terms, no matter from club president to district governor to Rotary International president, are only for 1 year.
So right there at your neighborhood club, everything is changing every
Yes.
year.
Yeah.
And so that in many cases, someone joining a club might be asked to participate in some way as a treasurer or a secretary or something of
Yes.
that nature, and could become president in a very short
Right.
period of time.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a very interesting thing in being able to develop as leaders, and also to interact with different people. So the aspect of something that's the buzzword today is social networking in some way, shape, or form. This is one of your more original forms of social networking, except it's done live and in person rather than via the internet. So, I mean, is there things where, with your guys' experience with Rotary, where that you think helped you in your business or in your professional life?
Before I answer that question, you see, this is an organization of business, professionals and leaders, but the thing is, the entire Rotary organization is run by volunteers. Everyone is a volunteer. So the technique we use in a business, an authoritative or this thing, you cannot use that in Rotary because we are all volunteers. We volunteer our time based upon the time we have. So we have to use very different techniques to motivate these volunteers and make them not make them, they volunteer to do it. So you don't have to make them do it, but to lead them into the kind of things we need to do to keep the Rotary strong so that we can make this world a better place. The techniques are not quite the same as in a business environment.
Absolutely
so the training,
not, yeah.
So the training is extremely important because we have to realize we are all volunteers.
Yeah, exactly. And so in this case, we're a business where you might be kind of the king of the hill or the chief of the whole
That is
organization.
correct. You cannot order
Rotary, in many cases, because that's part of what's required to join Rotary, is made up entirely of chiefs. And so you've got to kind of learn how to work with one another.
That's correct.
So we'll talk about that a little bit more when we come back and talk about some of the good work that Rotary does on a worldwide aspects. So when we see you next here on Service Above Self. So we get ourselves a PSA that's running there.
Does peace really have a chance within our lifetime? At Rotary, we believe it does. We've created programs at universities around the world, dedicated solely to teaching peace to a new generation. There's a new symbol for peace. Rotary.
This is a tree that was never chopped down, to make a crutch that was never needed, by a child who never got polio, because medicine was never in short supply, thanks to people whose compassion wasn't either. Over the past 20 years, Rotary Club members have helped immunize over 2 billion children against polio. Thanks to them, the world will soon be polio-free. Rotary, humanity in motion.
Welcome back to Service Above Self. We were just talking with incoming District Governor Prasad Menon and Jim Duza, past District Governor of District 7890. What are some of the things that have been done locally as far as service projects, things that the local clubs are doing for the community that's really making a difference?
Probably one of the projects most clubs embrace is that they provide dictionaries to a third grader and then follow it up with thesauruses for the seventh graders. Sometimes that third grader, that may be the only book that they have. And when you start to read the letters from those children that received the book, and it was from Rotary, I can't tell you now, being in Rotary over 16 years, the amount of people that I've run into that said, thank you for providing my child with a dictionary. So that's one of probably Rotary's signature projects that we do in the community.
So that's something that's done locally, literacy, but that's something that also is, in many cases, one of the projects that Rotary tries to do in a more international type of world, literacy. And we could talk about that a little bit. You two gentlemen certainly have volunteered to do things well beyond your own local clubs. And so you service on the district level. And you were mentioning earlier the district that we're in, 7890, pretty much comprises the northern part of Connecticut and western Massachusetts. And there's many other districts that are like that. What type of things that as a district get done as far as projects are concerned, and what is it that they do by combining the forces of many different clubs together?
One of the projects, everything is initiated by clubs, but as a district, several of the clubs, up to 17 clubs at this point, involved in is clean water for the developing countries, because about 6,000 children die a day because of the waterborne diseases, which we could have avoided. So it's extremely important to have clean water for these countries where children can be saved, and it doesn't cost too much. A $33 filter will provide enough water for a family of 10 for 10 years. So on an average, to save a child, we're talking about $1. So several clubs are now getting together, and my year is starting July 1, and that is my major priority, clean water. So we expect to get all clubs together as a combined effort. We should be able to do a lot more than what we have been doing in the past. So that's one thing we will be concentrating on next year.
Now, when you do this, you're actually not just sending money blindly off to some other part of the world. In many cases, when you're doing this type of work, there's a Rotary Club on the other end that's helping to orchestrate this in their local area. So while Rotary started here in the United States, it's now worldwide.
Yes.
So how many different areas do they have, and what are the number of members that are worldwide and clubs and things of that nature?
About 200 countries we have Rotary, and we have 1.2 million members, and there is 545 districts and 33,400 clubs in the world. And when we do a project, we always do that with the Rotary Club in that country, because we are not familiar with those countries. Those Rotary Clubs, people there are familiar with the countries, the cultural differences, local customs, and some of these countries also have a lot of corruption. So by sending money to a country, we don't know whether that is going to be used for the purpose we are intended for. So we always partner with the local Rotary clubs where there is a need, and everything is done through the local Rotary clubs so that they can keep an eye on what is going on. So we are sure on this side that the money we raise here, send there, or material we send there will be used for the kind of thing we want them to use for.
So that's a very good way to do that. So you know, in that way, you really have partnerships worldwide that are taking place. You know, it's been identified where there is a need of some kind,
Yes.
be it water or immunizations that might be
Yes.
needed, or proper sanitation, or literacy is another big one for Rotary around the world. And so by partnering with that, local clubs in this area have to work with clubs in other areas, and so that there's some mechanism by that works. Can you explain a little more on that, Jim?
Sure. What sets Rotary also apart is that when you give $1, or Rotarians give $1 to Rotary International, that dollar is invested for 3 years, and only the interest is used to cover the operating expenses of Rotary International. In 3 years, that money split up 50 cents to cover international projects, and 50 cents come back for local projects. So it allows us to, what other charity can you say you give $1 and you get $1 worth of benefit back? So that allows us to do many other programs, from international to local. But when we partner with other Rotary clubs, we also get the partnership from Rotary International, where they help match 50 cents on the dollar what we're doing internationally. We just, of course, had a tremendous outpouring from the Rotarians and the public in general for Haiti and for Chile for disaster recovery.
So that's a great thing that's getting done, and I know that our club, we did donate $300 that we had set aside for that type of a purpose pretty much as soon as the call went, and many other clubs are doing the same thing. Another thing that I know that happens is that there's different types of visitation that go on between international clubs. There's several different programs where people from this country will go to foreign nations, and people from foreign nations will come here. And could you explain how that type of stuff works?
Well, there's actually 3 programs that we utilize. It's Youth Exchange, where a family of a Rotarian takes a child in, typically from high school age, for 1 year, and they send their child abroad for a year. That's one program for dealing with youth. On the adult program, we offer 2 programs, a group study exchange, which is business professionals up to 35 years old that will go abroad for up to 6 weeks and do a study over there, learning and teaching about their vocation. And that same country sends 4 to 6 individuals here to learn about their vocation here in this country. And then the final program is an ambassadorial scholarship, where the district provides a $25,000 scholarship for a student to study abroad for a year.
So that's a pretty impressive thing, and there are ambassadorial scholars that come here as well. I know our club somewhat recently had a young lady from Germany who is actually, I believe, could be studying at Yale, was it? Or,
yeah.
Yes, and so she's actually working on a law degree here, and may eventually go back to Germany to complete her studies and then become a lawyer there. But it has an interesting life experience in actually coming to America and find out what Americans are all about. And so, you know, through understanding, hopefully people have less of a tendency to cause war and things of that nature. Are there other international types of projects or district type of projects that are close to your heart that you think have really made a difference in people's lives?
Polio.
So polio is something.
Polio eradication is the most important project for Rotary at this point. We started that just over 20 years ago, when we had 125 countries with polio incidents, including United States, if I remember correct. And there were about 1,000 people either contracted or crippled or died of polio every day at that time. And Rotary took on that project on an eradication of polio, which we really didn't know the extent of the problem at that point when we started and when we said we're going to eradicate polio in 4 years. But the more we got into it, the more we knew about it, more we learned about it. And we have been doing that for the last just over 20 years. And at this, until about 2006, we have only less than 1,500 cases a year in predominantly 4 countries. That means India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria, and mostly predominantly Muslim populated countries. And so we have been concentrating on our efforts into these 4 countries in the last 3-4 years. And hopefully in the next couple of years, we can call it eradicated and declare victory. That has been the biggest project we ever undertook. About $7 billion has been spent on it so far. And millions and millions of volunteers have worked on it, going around immunizing children. And several partners have been helping us, like World Health Organization, UNICEF, and especially Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who gave us $350 million, asking us to match $200 million. And so we are very close. We are getting there. We are getting all the help we need.
So that's great. Is there other things that are done on an international basis?
On my year as district governor, which ended July, about a year and a half ago, my focus and the president at that time was D.K. Lee, and his emphasis was on infant mortality. He told us when we started our year how 30,000 children every day died from a preventable cause. Think about that number, 30,000 children a day. So we put the whole full-fledged efforts of Rotary International to reduce that number of infant mortality from providing treated mosquito nets for malaria, clean drinking water, oral rehydration salts, and of course polio. We're happy to say that in that year we've now reduced that number to less than 24,000. So in 1 year time, we're saving 6,000 children every day.
So that's a pretty amazing thing that you can do by joining a Rotary Club and just meeting with some of your neighbors every week. So that's a pretty amazing thing. Hopefully you guys will go back another time and we'll talk more about some of those types of projects, but we've just about run out of time. So for a service above self, this is Clark Mason saying, go out and find a worthy cause and lend a helping hand and do some good work. So until next time, have a good night.